about the reentry program. So I'm just going to call the meeting to order, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kevin to go over the plan as is, and then we'll open it up to the school board after to start our conversation.
All right, just make sure, Pam, you have access to let them in now. Thank you.
And people are coming in.
Great.
Yep.
I was in the Google one because we didn't divorce the Google piece.
Yeah.
So the never-ending Google empty room fun of virtual meetings.
No, I was there the other week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me text
Okay.
Mike and let her. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Thank you.
No problem. So as per the request of Jackson School Board, I figured it's a good time to update you on the planning of the SAU 9 Reentry Committee and take a little bit of time to kind of bring you up to speed. And although the SAU 9 Reentry Committee speaks to all of the schools, I think you'll see that there's an acknowledgement that Jackson has very unique considerations as well. So we'll get started with that. As a result of this, right, you folks at the Jackson School Board have the opportunity to share your thoughts, concerns, and feedback regarding the current plans for reentry to the SAU 9 schools. So just a couple protocol pieces. Please use your microphone, mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and then use the chat box located on the toolbar for comments, questions, provide information. If you have your video that you can turn on, it'd be greatly appreciated. Usually these sessions will last in about 55 minutes or so. It's about 25 minutes of presentation and discussion. We are going to video record. We will have, a record of this, and I'll send it out to Hank so that it gets published out of Jackson as well. I do ask that, and people have asked, boy, do you have these sessions videotaped? And we do videotape them, but it's been my experience in sitting through some of these that people have shared some medical information. So I'm going to ask you, don't give me well, my child has this condition and what should happen, or my spouse is X, Y, and Z. So if you're going to ask general questions, do that. But if there are very specific individual pieces, please don't share that in public. We always want to be careful about doing that. So we're going to share this draft plan for consideration. You guys are going to share your thoughts, ideas, and like I said, we're recording it just to make sure. So the goal of the Reentry Committee: develop a dynamic operational plan for the return of SAU 9 students and staff to the facilities. That was really the charge of the committee. What does it look like when we return students to school? And then two questions that the Jackson School Board will have to answer as a board, collective board. So next Thursday night, the SAU 9 school board meeting will take place, and there will be a reentry plan that is now about 38 pages, I think, with a number of addendums. And hopefully that will be flushed out finally with a level of detail. And we'll send that out to you folks Monday afternoon. We had the SAU 9 Steering Committee, Reentry Steering Committee met yesterday. They're feeling comfortable recommending the reentry plan to the SAU 9 board. And you folks in Jackson will have to say, we agree with these recommendations or we don't agree with these recommendations. And then ultimately, as a Jackson School Board, you're going to take a look at Jackson Grammar School. And you're going to have to make decision about under which scenario will Jackson Grammar School open up under the 2020 or 2021 school year. So those are two questions keep in the back of your mind. You don't have to answer those tonight. Next Thursday night, it'll be a much greater level of detail. And like I said, the reentry plan, you'll get it with advance notice so that you can go through in finer detail and take a look at those pieces. So that meeting will be at Kennett High School. for the board members. It'll be Zoom so people can join in. It'll be videotaped by Valley Vision as well. And then that will be the discussion at the SAU 9 level. So the guiding principles for planning. So getting this group of 50 people together, and then the steering committee had about 12 to 14 people on it. And these were talked about right off the bat. Safety of the student, staff, and the community are the primary concern. Acknowledging the benefits of students returning to the school facilities. American Pediatrics Association also, we had 2 doctors on the committee, acknowledging that there are a tremendous number of benefits for students returning to school. We also recognize the decision that you make today can be very dynamic, and whatever decision is made next Thursday night, ultimately the Jackson School Board should, and I've rescheduled another SAU 9 meeting on my calendar, and hopefully the SAU 9 board agrees that we're going to meet again at the end of August because these conditions are changing. So we need to be adaptable and focus on reducing the risk and creating a safer environment. There's an inherent risk that does come with everything that we do, and we notice that. And this plan tries to reduce risk as much as possible and creating that safer environment. So the decision-making process, and I think this is a good thing for board members to take a look at, is it attainable? Can we do this? Can we pull this off? I will tell you that the steering committee and the committee members are doing everything in their power to turn over every rock, challenge every resource that we do have to make it attainable. We don't know. These conditions may change over time, and it's not attainable. Is it beneficial, right? Are pieces of this plan beneficial to the students in our schools? And then is it feasible? Can we afford to do it? Do we have all of the resources to make it work? So the focus was on planning. What can we do to plan these pieces? And again, reduce the risk, prevent as much as possible the transmission of COVID-19, and then how will we respond should somebody be diagnosed or confirmed with COVID-19? And the other part is we acknowledge that you folks in Jackson are definitely different than Kennett High School. So the recommendations are more universal, and we'll talk about some of those pieces, but the conditions and the resources are different at each one of the schools. Just the physical layout of the buildings are different. The number of students who ride the buses in different places is different. So you folks have different resources that you can use. The planning process, I will tell you that I am extremely proud of the work that is done, whether you agree with the ultimate decisions or not. The fact that we started in June, on June 10th, to get organized, and we've been meeting weekly, bi-weekly, 4 times a week, 5 times a week, whatever it happened to be that needed to take place. These committees have been just cranking out, and there have been, I think, 8 iterations of this reentry plan in the past week or so. Part of what has happened is we had listening sessions, and we've had over 20 listening sessions throughout SAU 9. And those were open to the public, and we had good attendance. We've had hundreds of people weigh in on and ask questions, and really good questions. And the building principals have spoken to their parents and staff members with the logistics of how they think it's going to work at the elementary schools and at the middle schools and at the high school. But one thing we found was that we needed a little bit more information over the past 2 weeks. And through these listening sessions, we did hear from people saying, hey, what if we don't feel comfortable with this? What if we don't want our students to come back to school? And one of the things that we're going to talk about is, there were 3 options previously until about a week and a half ago. And then we started thinking about a 4th option, and we'll talk about that tonight. And it's that distance learning option. We've studied a number of plans in other places. And as I said, it's morphing. So to give an absolute answer today, I can do that today. But as things change, that will influence some of the decisions in the ability to deliver education differently. So then yesterday was July 29. All of these pieces went to the steering committee. And in the steering committee felt like with some small minor edits here and some changes, and I know our district-wide nurses were getting confirmation from Dr. Chan at the New Hampshire Health and Human Services. And there will be a couple addendums that will go in over the next day. They feel like, okay, we can recommend the plan to the SAU 9 board. Next Thursday, August 6th, is really all the board members. We encourage people to show up and be part of it. There's huge decisions that need to be made. And you'll get a chance. It'll be a full presentation of the entire plan. So get snacks before you come to the meeting, and we'll go through that process. Now, after the SAU 9 meeting, August 6th, each one of the school boards, it'd be great if everyone left, next Thursday night and said, we got it. This is the plan. This is a decision that we're making. We're at this time, we're either coming back face to face or we are totally going remote. Now, again, I would revisit and talk about, that's going to be August 6th. We're going to also propose the calendar for if we come back, students would return on September 8th. So that would be a little bit of a change, and we can talk a little bit more about that for staff members to get ready either for remote or face-to-face piece. The Jackson School Board I would imagine you might want to set up a meeting for, August 7th or August 8th if you feel differently than what the SAU 9 board recommends. That's up to you folks. And then what will happen is Principal Dembowski will have to put an implementation plan together. And then, so here's the plan, here's the mode that we're looking at, and how are we going to deliver that? And then that will be the work of August. So I know poor Gail hasn't had much of a summer vacation as nobody else has, but that will be the next phase. So what will it look like? Part of it is recognizing that the school environment and the traditions that we did have will look a little bit differently. So drop off and pickup, there will be staggered times in the different schedules that are there to limit the congregation of students and community members. So, for example, and Gail can speak to this, but I know in other schools, they're looking at different entrances to the buildings to limit different places. The cafeteria will be limited, libraries will be limited in how those are operating, but also changing of classes and break times and all of those pieces. Transportation, you folks in Jackson have different conditions, but the recommendation is to reduce the number of transported kids on the buses. So one of the things that we're going to talk about is in the bigger groups, really developing these cohorts, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And what that is trying to control the interaction between groups of students and staff with other groups of students and staff. And the reason for that is when we start talking about contact tracing, if somebody is diagnosed or confirmed with COVID-19, we want to know there's an assigned bus seat. This student rode the bus here every single day, and we're going to know who that student was near. And we're going to report that to DHHS, and we're going to go through that whole process. So cohorting is essentially talking about keeping track of where those students are and who they are exposed with. Health screenings, daily health screenings for students and staff. I know that our staff, every single day, we answer questionnaires, take the temperature, and we record all of those pieces. We're going to have that for all of the staff, and also we're going to be asking parents and students to do that on a daily basis. There will probably be daily screenings in school as well for temperature checks and the like. Quarantining and isolation. So if students and staff are exposed, they may be asked to quarantine, depending upon the level. And we will work with our medical providers and DHHS to determine that level. Facility usage and access. So one of the pieces that will probably be a school board decision is about the Whitney Center and how you want to move forward with the Whitney Center. Well, if Principal Dembowski talks about utilizing that space, are you again going to restrict or limit some of the use of the Whitney Center? I don't know, but those are the type of considerations that you want to take into place. You have a beautiful outdoor building. You have great space out there that I'm sure that that will be part of the plan. We live in a beautiful part of the country. Outdoor is really important. Visitors may be permitted, but the recommendation will be to schedule the appointment so that, again, trying to minimize the exposure to different groups of people all over the place. Sanitizing the building, cleaning, that's a continuous piece that I think people have really learned how to wash their hands and keep surfaces clean throughout the buildings. Masks, there's a strong recommendation for all students staff members, when they're in the buildings, to wear masks. Again, that's a question that you folks, as a Jackson School Board, Bartlett may say, absolutely, we're wearing masks. In Conway may say, yeah, we're absolutely mandating these masks. And Jackson may say, we don't care if they wear masks or not. Those are ultimately your decisions for the Jackson Grammar School. I would like to think that as much consistency as possible will be had. And again, the whole purpose of this plan is to minimize the risk and create the safer environment. Personnel, yeah, there are going to be training pieces that will have to take place throughout for the staff members, mask wearing. They're going to work with kids on how to put their masks on, clean devices, how to wipe down keyboards if they're using that, all of those pieces. At lunches, we will deliver lunches as we did, regardless of whether we're in remote or whether we're face-to-face. And then co-curricular, that's going to be, at the high school and middle school level, guided by NHIAA. I received a email from the NHIAA today that they're pushing back the start of the season until at least September 8th. So we'll keep track of that. So we've talked about parent responsibilities, and really during these listening sessions, even if you start face-to-face, there may be a moment, just like when we went from March 13th, Friday, to March 15th, where we're going to have to make the change and transition from face-to-face back to remote learning very quickly. We're going to ask parents to practice hygiene, sanitizing, preparation for attending school. And a big piece is monitoring and screening health concerns, including the temperature and/or screening checks prior to sending the students to school. If students are experiencing, and we'll get a little bit more into depth about this, experiencing symptoms or not feeling well, keep the children home, communicate with the school so that we can record it as well. So when we went through H1N1, 10 years or so ago, we were reporting daily to Department of Health and Human Services because they want to see those trends as well. We would ask parents to reinforce physical distancing, minimizing exposure to large groups. Living where we do, that's becoming difficult, but I know that a lot of people are very careful about creating their own cohorts. I live in a neighborhood that has about 10 students, and they have been together, and they do all day long. But there are very few guests who ever come over at all. And then the mask wearing, we ask people, and I know that some people have different opinions about that, but we defer to the doctors and the CDC guidelines about masks, and they have a very strong opinion that masks need to be worn. We also talk about student responsibilities, very, very similar. Practicing the hygiene, wearing the face mask. They'll be cleaning. It'll be part of what they do is their daily routines. Try to adhere to the physical distancing, monitoring their health symptoms. And remember, this is for preschool age students all the way to grade 12. So these are those universal pieces that we were talking about. And then staying home when they're sick. And then also be prepared for face-to-face in remote instruction. Scheduling, this has been probably one of the biggest challenges that we've had here, is how do we ensure equitable opportunities for all the students, right? And but that is why people are wrestling so much with the different models and trying to reach everybody, have some flexibility within the structure to make that happen. And then reasonable and realistic expectations for students, developmentally appropriate, as safe as possible, reflect our core values. Also, the one of the biggest things that we saw when we were in remote instruction was the social and emotional needs. It gave people, teachers throughout the district. We used to hear about what was happening at home, but now we actually get to see into these kids' houses, and I will tell you that this is, I think, there are a lot of students who need our schools, and they need our schools to be open, and that's why I think we're exhausting everything that we can do to get them back. Ensuring students have access to meals each day is super important, and we're still working with the integrated arts in how to integrate that into the curriculum and make sure that we still have those pieces in our day. I don't know if we're going to be able to have woodwinds and instruments practicing. That's usually a high risk is what we're taking a look at, but making sure that we still have those in place. We may have a huge drum line by the time we're all done. We also have to meet contractual obligations, and we're talking about planning time and teacher duties, and we have to meet the minimum standards as required by the Department of Education. So those are always juggling pieces that we're trying to do. And then making sure that we have access to special services for our students. So this is probably what people are interested in as well, is what are the scenarios that the school districts are looking at. So it was face-to-face learning. That's everybody would come back. And when I say everybody would come back, the intent is to have everybody who wants to be back to school come back to school, right? So the school board makes a decision. Hey, look, we have face-to-face learning. That's the scenario that you have here, okay? It's not options. It's we've decided the buildings are open and we can have everybody here. And then when we talk about hybrid learning, some people were different under impression that you would say, okay, we're going to go hybrid. Well, part of what happens with hybrid learning and the whole intent of that is to reduce the capacity in a particular building. much like the restaurants open to capacity at 25% or 50%. So how are we going to reduce the number of students in the building? And there are schedule models that are out there, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So it's a 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off piece, and trying to make that all work. Jackson, it's a little bit different because of the numbers that you do have, but I know that the other schools are looking at that. So that would almost be, like I said, we would get guidance from the medical field and professionals that would say, you know, you can only open at 50% capacity. And then the last part would be in the event that, we get cases of COVID in our schools, we need to be able to say, hey, look, we're shutting it down and we're taking a 2 week break where we have a hut building, we're gonna close it down and go to remote learning. Or like I said, the Jackson School Board could say, you know what, we don't feel comfortable, we're gonna put everybody on remote learning. So those were the three pieces. And then all of a sudden we had a lot of folks through these listening sessions were saying, all right, well, I'm not really comfortable because if you have a medical condition, we're going to provide that for you. Even in face-to-face learning, if Joan is teaching and somebody has to be quarantined, she's going to keep that person as part of that cohort, and we will we'll make that happen. But then there was this other option, if you will, that people are looking at in terms of, well, I would like to have my students not attend school face-to-face, and I really want them to be educated online or remotely. And we'll get into that a little bit more about what that looks like. So what we've done is we've sent out surveys to parents, and we've also recognized that there are staff members who have considerations that we have to take a look at. So we're trying to determine what's the supply and demand, and how do we reallocate our resources to make that happen, right? So, Principal Dembowski can talk a little bit about what that might look like, but we need to find out, okay, in Jackson, there are, 42 kids, and we have a commitment that 15 of those kids want distance learning. What does that look like? And you see that as we keep going, we'll go a little bit more. So what does face-to-face instruction look like? Basically, you're coming in and you're staying with your cohorts for most of the day. We're trying to limit the number of cohorts, use flexible groupings of students in there. At the middle school, they're again building cohorts. They may have two teachers that they go to on a daily basis. And then in the high school, they're looking at modules of instruction where students would essentially take 4 classes, and then for 2 week periods, they would be on one schedule, and then for 2 weeks after that, they would be on the next schedule. So half their time, they'd be going to school every day, but their exposure would be a little bit differently. So hybrid, like I said, you're just trying to minimize the capacity of students in a particular building. So if you go to the hybrid model, 2 week cycles, I know some people were talking about why 2 week cycles. I've seen different models, every other day kids come in. And again, the logic behind that was to minimize the number of students in the building, to minimize the contamination for that. And also 2 week period of time allows for people to plan a little bit better. And then, there you can see some of the other models. I'll keep it moving. Remote instruction, it would be similar but improved. We've learned a lot about remote instruction. I think that the teachers did an outstanding job, and I know in Jackson they did a knockout job there, but we can always improve upon that. So There's going to be continued professional development and looking at how to be the best, most effective instructors we can. So here's the distance learning piece, right? So that other option, if you will. So parents say, well, the school talked about making sure that we have face-to-face and the decisions made for face-to-face. Not comfortable with that. Not comfortable with that. I don't know what's going on. I'm not happy with the plan. I don't want my kid to wear a mask every day, whatever it happens to be, multitude of reasons. And we've heard a lot. I've heard many different pieces. Compromised, family members, or my child has certain conditions, all of those pieces. So one of the pieces that we took a look at was we need to gauge how many students, and that's why that survey went out. And in some of the other schools, in Conway, if you will, they have the 3 elementary schools and 600 and some odd students. We need to determine how many people are looking at this model and are saying that they want that. So one of the frustrating pieces and the hard pieces is we're going to ask parents to commit to this because we don't have enough resources to simply designate some of our teachers to do both. In trying to reduce the cohort of students, right, to 10 or 12, that's what we're looking at in some of the districts. We have to utilize every single staff member, and we're doing that. So if we take a teacher out of the equation at the elementary school, I'll just use elementary right now, out of the elementary school, and we say you are going to do remote instruction for grades 3, 4. Now we've reduced the ability to have another cohort within the school. So we're trying to figure out, it may be that a Conway Elementary School teacher is teaching remote, but their students are coming from Pine Tree, John Fuller, and the like. Jackson's in a little bit different situation. At the high school level, it may be that we have designated remote instruction teachers. So if you're a social studies teacher, you may teach 4 sections of remote instruction. The middle school, same thing. Or it could be, if I'm a social studies teacher, I have 2 classes face-to-face, but I also have 2 classes that are remote. So we're trying to build in as much flexibility. But what is extremely difficult, and I know that people want this, but you have to understand, if we're designating staff members to deliver remote instruction, we really need a commitment to use that resource. So that's why it says through December for K-8, end of first semester for Kennett High School. Again, the Jackson board, and I would caution you not to allow it to go back and forth, because then it would be a nightmare, and I'm trying to protect the teachers from that. Now, there are different models that are specific to Jackson and the number of kids, so that's why we need to find that out. But what we want to make sure is if we have the staff members, if you're a VLAC student, right, Virtual Learning Academy Charter School, okay, there are classes that you can take online through this charter school. We have a number of students who do this. It used to be at one time grades 9 through 12, and then it was expanded to 7th and 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. And most recently this summer, they have gone kindergarten up through grade 12. So if we can provide all of those staffing pieces, we will do everything that we can to make that happen. Yeah, and I think that explains that option, and I'm sure there are probably more comparisons. So I'm going to blow this up a little bit in to hopefully give you that the difference between the face-to-face learning and the distance learning. Let me see if I can make it even a little bit bigger here. Okay, so we'll start. Learning connections, school-based, face-to-face, depending upon the COVID condition. So if the determination is to come back face to face, we'll do on site, right? And then if we need to go to a hybrid model, we can do that in a remote model. And then if you choose the distance learning, you're all online. Homeschooling is a different situation. So, if you do VLAX, you could do that. The duration of face-to-face is, as I said, we need to be flexible. If the conditions change in COVID-19, we may go from one to the other. It may be a section of the building. Some of our schools, it could be a wing that goes down. It could be an individual cohort that goes down. And then in distance learning, you're talking about K through 8, again, through December, holidays. That's a natural break time. So it allows the schools to reconfigure, cohorts if need be, make adjustments, reallocate staff depending upon whether students want to come in or out, and that could take place. Teachers in the face-to-face or school-based SAU 9 certified instructors that we have supported by other staff members, and depending upon the demand and SAU 9 staff availability, it could be VLAX staff or it could be assigned SAU 9 staff members. So in Jackson, is there potential for one of the teaching staff to do remote? Well, again, I think that as we find out more information, we can do that. The classmates, cohorts of students from the enrolled school in the face-to-face, if you choose this distance learning piece, it's across schools or it could be throughout the state, depending upon if you choose VLAX or not. The curriculum that we use is based upon the SAU 9 competencies and curriculum maps that we do have. And in the distance piece, if we have staff members available, they will follow the curriculum of SAU 9. And if it's VLAX or other, based upon the Common Core state standards and materials from the Florida virtual school. Then we can go through some of the learning pieces, primarily independent learning using primary digital interactions or socially constructed learning. Expectations, both of them have expectations of attendance and work completion. These would follow the school here. Same thing if you're with SAU 9 staff, you'd follow that. And VLAX has also some pieces related to that. Teacher time, there's a traditional school day beginning and end time with a schedule for students if it's face-to-face. And if it's distance, depending upon what model that it is, the teacher would set designated times for that. Either way, if there are students, we're going to provide devices for them. And special services, if it's face-to-face, it would be provided within the school day, 504 Title I guidance, family support. If it's distance, it could be provided remotely as required by the IEP. And what's it recommended for? Basically, anybody who wants to come to school, we're taking that. And then distance model, really students requiring consistent alternative to face-to-face instruction. And then also, we may have some students who, whatever the protocols are, and they just choose not to do that, then we would move them there. And then at the bottom, just note it's not homeschooling, and homeschooling follows its own process. And homeschooling, anybody who wants to homeschool, they just simply write a letter to either the Commissioner of Education or myself, and then folks are responsible for delivering homeschooling to their children. Okay, I'm gonna keep it moving. Sorry about this taking a little longer, but transportation, we'll go through it real quickly. Again, we're gonna ask the PPE requirements, hand sanitizing, all those pieces, documentation of attendance. We need to know where those students are and who they were in contact with on a daily basis. Establish bus routes and bus assignments.